where we will be talking about As For Me and My House by Sinclair Ross. As you may be able to tell from my accent, I am not Canadian, I'm actually Scottish, and I can't say I've read a whole ton of CanLit, so I see my role here this week as bringing kind of an outsider's perspective into the traditions of CanLit and onto the story. Appropriately, this book is about a character named Mrs. Bentley, although we never find out her name directly and we never find out her first name, and the book is comprised of diary entries, and so I kind of see that as a way of us being outsiders looking into her life. Strangely, I didn't actually pick up on the fact that you never learn the protagonist's name, but I think that it's an important omission because she omits herself even from the title. It's called As For Me, My House, and what she mostly talks about is her husband and her husband's job, and her whole job within this narrative is trying to let herself into her husband's life. She's also an outsider almost of her own marriage. She's always trying to find ways to make her husband let her in. Two things made this a very difficult read for me. The first was the husband in the first place, that she's working so hard to let him in, but he's very mean-spirited and he's a very hard person and he's very difficult to kind of get to know emotionally. He seems like he's always pushing her away, he's always finding ways to kind of look at things side on instead of head on, and he's so sensitive. There's so many little things in the book that she knows are going to piss him off but she does them anyway, and they just seem so insignificant. This book is set during the Great Depression of the 1930s, and that's certainly a theme throughout. Poverty is a theme. They find it very difficult living on the breadline. She's always trying to handle their finances but doesn't want to hurt his ego by asking him to chase up money that they're owed, and so there's always kind of a dance around all those issues, and there's just this really strong theme of oppression. For me, the oppressiveness of the relationship was completely tied up in the oppressiveness of the weather. They live in a very harsh landscape where it's constantly cold, bitterly cold, windy. The wind seems to trap them inside the household, and it's whistling around them at all times, keeping them bound together and with no way to spring apart. Everything in the book conspires to keep Mrs. Bentley indoors, and that's why I have some theories about how she gets around that. Jason asked some questions about the unreliable narrator, and I think every first-person narrative is an unreliable narrator in some ways at least. Her viewpoint is very distant from the action. We see everything through the filter of Mrs. Bentley, and in the same way we don't know whether we can trust her or not. I didn't really see Mrs. Bentley as an unreliable narrator in the kind of demonic sense. I think Jason perhaps got a little bit of a sense that she was a bit evil, and I just think she's up to something, but I don't think that it really hurts the people around her. I think it's almost like she's toying with them just to get a wee bit of roughness out of them, because the whole book is about people bumping up against each other but never really roughing each other up, and I think that there's something to that. I really like those tensions between Mrs. Bentley and the weather too. There are points where it's just so cold and so miserable that she's just kind of trapped, and all she can really do is kind of vie for Philip's attention. Then there are other points where it's hot and it's windy and there's like sand everywhere, and it felt so disgusting, like I felt dirty underneath my clothes. And I think that that's another way that he drives this novel, is to create so much discomfort that is both from within and from without. There are also some hopeful moments which helpfully coincide with the sunshine, and you feel like maybe they're making some progress at those moments. Point where they adopt Steve, where they get a horse. There's a part where they go on holiday and it seems like everything is going to be great, and you're kind of hopeful for it, but at the same time you know that this book is not going to let that happen. So the weather and the people within the book never really align to allow Mrs. Bentley to have like an easy going and easy life. And I found a quote here from William H. New where he outlines his response to this kind of idea. So I'm just going to be looking down to read this for you. It says, "The overall left by the book is certainly one of aridity, of dust and heat, the depression on the prairies and the drought which went with it. And accompanying the unproductivity of the land is the dryness of the people. Mrs. Bentley, who cannot bear a child; Philip, who does not believe in his church and cannot comfort the people; the people themselves, who in Mrs. Bentley's eyes cannot appreciate anything or anyone beyond their own restricted world. Yet this directly conflicts with the view of them she gives us by the end of the book, so obviously, quote, in Mrs. Bentley's eyes, end quote, is the operative phrase here. By extension, we suspect all of her affirmations, finding them in partial truths that ring ironically against the complex realities Ross ultimately allows us to glimpse." Reading that really struck me, the idea of the dryness of her being a dry person, of them having dry lives, and even the idea that she can't bear a child contributes to this dryness. They're just like this arid desert of people not getting along and of there just being like no levity in the air. In his video, Jason outlined a theory that perhaps Mr. Bentley or Philip is a gay character, and I certainly see where that's coming from. It wasn't something that I really thought about an awful lot while I was reading, but there are certainly hints there where he's a bit feminine, or you know, he doesn't have physical strength. There are certain jobs around the house that Mrs. Bentley either has to do in his place when they're really men's jobs, or where she wants to do them herself but she doesn't want to be seen. So things like her gardening, she couldn't dig a hole and had to have him do it for her, and that brought him a lot of shame. I think there is something to that theory, although maybe it falls apart a bit towards the end of the book as certain events come to pass. But I do definitely agree with the idea that she struggles with his lack of masculinity, and the idea that he is not able to see her as a woman in the traditional way that a man would see a woman in a heteronormative relationship. But it did make me think that perhaps she's a bit of a schemer, especially in relation to the character of Paul, who seems to have a bit of a romantic interest in her, and which kind of gets up Philip's ire and jealousy. But perhaps that's intentional. We see throughout the novel that Mrs. Bentley is a very thoughtful person. She's capable of intricate thought. We see that through her prose, and then we also see that through her ability to play piano. There's a storyline where she's trying to learn this really intricate piece of music to play at a concert, and we know that she can dedicate herself wholly to some kind of artistic or kind of larger pursuit. You start to see this in the book where she hatches her plan first to adopt Steve, but then secondly, and I think more importantly, when she hatches the plan to save $1,000 and go and run a bookshop in town. The thing with Mrs. Bentley is that she's always orchestrating something, and another moment where I felt like this was really well demonstrated is when she buys paints for Philip, because it's her way of building up his confidence. So this is where I think the real complexity comes into play between the couple, the Bentleys. I think that when she does rough him up a little bit, and when she is kind of trying to wind him up, that she is trying to wind him up, that it's not that she's dancing around the subject. Like she knows that something's going to hurt his feelings, but she says it as gently as she can, but she never jumps in and apologizes. And I think that she is really trying to get him out of himself in any way that she can, even when it means upsetting him and that backfiring. So to go back to Paul, I do kind of question her relationship with Paul. I think that she knows that Philip will get jealous, that she's biding her time until he does. I think she enjoys his affections, although she never admits it on paper. And I think that perhaps this is all kind of a ruse in case Philip really did read her diary one day. I also think that Paul is a great foil to Philip because their names are kind of similar. Philip is an artist and Paul is a man of words. You know, they're both interested in the arts and in culture, although Philip is more into applying those and Paul is more of just a thinker. Yet Philip is able to show affection to Mrs. Bentley in ways that Philip cannot. And I think those things kind of flip-flop when you think about Mrs. Bentley, because then you have Philip who's completely unable and inert and not able to perform any of his husbandly duties, whereas Paul comes along and is able to encourage Mrs. Bentley in her pursuits. They're good friends, they have conversation, and more importantly, he drops the odd compliment. And so bearing in mind that Mrs. Bentley is reporting all of this, I think she's doing just enough to make him jealous. I almost even wonder if Philip is reading the diary and that she's orchestrating this from the inside. I think that Mrs. Bentley is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I think you should keep an eye out for her, because those kind of people, man, you just never know. I hope that was a coherent contribution to the conversation that we're having here about the book As For Me in My House by Sinclair Ross, and I hope that you'll join me in the comments to discuss this further. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think that Mrs. Bentley is a little bit unreliable? What do you think of Philip? Do you think that he is involved? Is he reading the diary? Is she orchestrating this from the inside? Because that's kind of my grand theory. And also tell me what you think about Paul. Do you think that he fancies Mrs. Bentley, or do you think she's setting him up as a foil to her husband? Thanks so much for joining us for this discussion. Don't forget to check out the first discussion video with Jason on the same book. And don't forget to check out his most recent video about a giveaway of the book Bone and Bread from Anansi. I'm not based in Canada, so I can't win it, but I hope that one of you guys will. Emily and Jess will be here soon to contribute to the conversation. In the meantime, please say hello to us on the comment section and on Twitter and elsewhere. I'll leave all the links below. Take care, guys. Thanks so much for having me here in Hello Hemlock, and all the best to you all. Bye bye.